This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Yeah, I've just purged my Alan Partridge and I'm here for the next 90 minutes or approximately 4 hours if it feels like it. Welcome to the Easter Twilight show, which I've called Shell Shocked. It's a pun. It's a play on words because it's Easter and we talk about shells and new life and the fact that Easter is now sponsored by Cadbury. But it's a play on words, Shell Shocked. I was pretty excited when I came up with that. If you're getting the yokes that I'm saying, you will. It might be that you're feeling a bit scrambled by the difficulty with egg jokes at Easter is that mainly they're about the raw egg style that we would talk about, rather than the chocolate egg. And when I realised that most of my egg plans had been foiled. Yeah. Easier crowd in primary, to be honest. The music sounds like there's some urgent information I need to share, so I'll make some up.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Now, obviously, I'd rather you didn't talk it out. I'd rather I talked it out, and I've got a packed show for you. By packed, I mean that I've got a lot of the same features. I've made no new jingles, unfortunately, but I have got the new features, shall I say, and lots of new content. So you know the story. I'm a very, very young-looking primary teacher who is also very, very long in the tooth. I discovered today that what I thought were my blonde highlights on the side under a brutal optician's light was actually grey. So it is happening. I'm hoping to grow grey gracefully, and I'm hoping it makes me look more distinguished, perhaps even a little older. True story, I was recognised on a train station about 4 years ago by someone I went to school with, secondary school, so that's almost 30 years, and I had struggled. It's more than 30 years, isn't it? I struggled to remember who they were, but they recognised me immediately. So I looked as much of a twit then as I do now. Fair enough. We can accept that. I can tolerate that. It no longer works that I joke that I'm almost 30 in the class. The children now can establish that is very clearly sarcastic. I think I might have to dial it up to almost 35. Certainly it makes the TAs snigger, which is one of my 5 main values in the classroom. Make the adults laugh and hope that the jokes fly over their head. Very grateful to one of the TAs who explained what the word many meant. It means a lot when they share that. It means a lot. Anyway, primary teacher for 25 years in a range of settings and locations. And I've taught for everything from year 1 up to year 8. Never been allowed to teach reception. Quite odd. I have asked, but it's not happened yet. I'm hoping that this will happen at some point soon. It'd be really nice if it did. Anyway, this is the show. It's the Twilight Easter show, and we've got a whole range of things. I'm going to start off with a little feature that has been very popular in the past. Maybe it's not as popular anymore, but it's called this. Appy Teacher. So this is a feature that we do every single time where I recommend a app. And this is a very, very niche app for teachers that I'm recommending this time. And it's called What the Font. And What the Font is exactly like What the F, but instead of F, it's font, F-O-N-T. And it is, no joke, brilliant. It's particularly good, and I'll explain why in a moment. Really good around Christmas time and your birthday. But what it basically does is uses your camera or an image that you've taken and is fairly accurate at identifying the font from that photograph or from the camera. So you basically download it. It's a very, very small file. Take a picture of a font that you like, and you can select a word, and then you can change the word. So if it's not particularly clear due to the kerning, which is how close the letters are to each other, you can write down what the word is, and you can actually then very easily identify the font because it gives you a list of choices of fonts. And on the subject of this, I want to cover where I get fonts from, why fonts matter, and also phone habits. I'm hoping that's okay. If you want to participate, you can, of course, participate. But so the reason I say it's very good at Christmas and birthday times is because when you get a lot of Christmas cards, the range of fonts they use is superb. So you can take a picture of the Christmas cards, or you can scan using the app and identify what the fonts that have been used are, which is brilliant because I think that fonts have a voice, and it's wonderful to use that voice in your teaching materials. It's really, really acceptable to use the standard, the default, but if you want a default lesson, then use the default. I don't want a default lesson. I want to personalize my lessons, so I do use fonts an awful lot. Now, this can come a cropper if you're using fonts that aren't installed on your computer at school. So let's say you're using your laptop at home, your home laptop, to do some planning or create some work, some slides. If you use your own font, you have to embed those fonts in order for them to be working at work. Now, one way around that is to use Google Fonts. If you type in Google Fonts into any search engine, but particularly Google, you will discover that there's over 1,000 fonts that they have organized and licensed for, and they are the ones that are available on all of your slides in Google Slides. So it's a good strategy to find slides that work both at home and at school when you're planning, and Google Fonts are really good for that because they are licensed. They're not all commercially free, so you can't sell some resources if you're using those fonts, so do check the licensing of the font, but the vast majority are. It's over 1,000, and it's quite worthwhile going onto Google Fonts and just having a look at the range of fonts. I'm going to say fonts about another 78 times, I reckon. The other thing I'd like to mention and draw your attention to is where you can get fonts from. So you're looking for something a little bit unusual. I was creating a resource for Mayans, and I was thinking of finding some graphics that I could use that. But there are a whole range of people who make fantastic fonts for all sorts of purposes, and they can also be used for not just letters. You can use them for something called dingbats, and dingbats are, instead of letters, you would have pictures. So I typed in Mayans on a specific website that I'm going to mention in a moment, and the range of Mayan images I got was absolutely fantastic, saved me an awful lot of hassle and trouble. You can treat them as a graphic, and it was a brilliant way of illustrating the resource that I was making. The website that I'm going to recommend to you is Dafont, Dafont. It's really, really good. You can have user-submitted fonts. I've made some fonts and uploaded them, and it's only taken 18 months for them to land, some of them. But it's a really good way of uploading and sharing good fonts and also discovering new fonts. So I often explore Dafont. I try wherever possible to go for the commercial use or royalty-free options, because some of them are for personal use only, and I tend to think if I'm using it for personal use and then that resource ends up being really useful and I want to put it on TES resources, for example, morally I can't sell that because I'm using a font that's for personal use only. So I would recommend going to those settings in Dafont and highlighting the fact that you're after royalty-free or commercial use availability. And the other place to go for fonts is Font Squirrel. Ridiculous name, but those are all of the fonts on Font Squirrel are absolutely free to use commercially or personally. It's really handy that you don't have to worry about the royalty on those fonts. So we've talked about fonts an awful lot. I apologise. I think I've got another 16 times that I'm going to mention the word font. 15. In the next hour and a half or the hour 20. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is your habits within your phones. So we're coming up to Easter. And I've got 2 recommendations for you to improve your phone habits. Now, we all know the phone habits because we get a naggy message, don't we? Those iPhone users certainly get a naggy message with a weekly summary of your screen time. Every Monday, mid-morning, gets a little nag and reminds you of just how bad your habits are. And I found 2 ways that absolutely destroy this score to make it really shrink down. And in terms of mental health, I like to think of it as mental wealth, and you're trying to accumulate that wealth. The one way of doing that is to actually extract yourself away from the online and visit the online, the analog of our world. And so here are 2 methods. The first method is really simple. You go to bed and you turn off your phone. You literally turn it off. You can plug it in. Absolutely, you can plug it in, but you can turn it off. So you power it down because the phone will restart with an alarm. Most people go, oh, no, I need my phone on by my bed because it's my alarm. Firstly, you can buy an alarm for about £5. Secondly, it will turn back on. If you set up an alarm, it will wake you back up. It's brilliant for those middle of the night moments where we've woken up and you do a little bit of scrolling and then suddenly half an hour has gone. And I am as guilty of that as anyone else, but I have taken to turning off my phone at night. And if I wake up during the night, I'll either lie there and imagine my ideal home, which is a bit sad, but it occupies my brain certainly. Or what I will do is I'll read for a bit because I found that reading is like an absolute tonic for getting back to sleep. So that's one strategy. If you find that too scary, I would suggest that you plug your phone either away from your bed, so in your room, or you plug it in downstairs, out of sight, out of mind. I saw a brilliant graphic the other day, and it was your concentration level when you're watching TV. With your phone beside you, it's all over the place. With your phone the other side of the room, it's much better. Your phone on a completely different floor to you, if that's possible, try it out because it really is a successful way of engaging more, getting rid of that little distraction. Second thing that I would recommend you do is to delete your social media apps. Do that for Easter. Treat yourself. You can look at them on desktop if you want to, but turn off the scrolling ability, the endless scroll on your phone, by deleting the apps and just enjoying the moment. So next week I'm going away with my children. I'm taking all 4 of them away. Might be bringing back 3, depends how it goes, but we're going on the Norfolk Broads and I want to relish these moments. I have 168 hours of holiday coming up with them and I want to relish every moment. And in order to do that, I don't want to have the temptation, distraction of, it's gone a little bit quiet, I'm going to scroll a little bit. So here's my challenge to you. I'm going to look really carefully at my viewing time for this past week and then the week after holiday time, and I'm sure it'll be less. I was down 22% from last week to this week just by turning off my phone at night. 22% less screen time. That's insane, isn't it? Absolutely insane. Worth a try. Anyway, that's me talking a lot about phone habits, but I think it's really, really useful for looking after ourselves as teachers. We really do need to do things like that. So I'd highly recommend turning off your phone at night and deleting your social media apps. Certainly the apps that you look at an awful lot. And I would say some of the biggest dangers for that are, for me, Twitter and TikTok to a certain extent. Very easy to kill 10 minutes with that. But it is possible to do an awful lot in 10 minutes. Think of the other things you could do in 10 minutes. I'm keeping this PG, but I'm thinking of more sensible things rather than scrolling on your phone. Reading for 10 minutes is quite a magical thing, and you can get through a book in a month with just 10 minutes reading a day. So you could quite easily get through 12 books if you turned off your social media apps just for 10 minutes a day. Anyway, on to something else. Hey, we've all done it. Rushed to the staff room to make a cup of tea, then taken it back to our classroom, forgotten about it, and then drunk it, cold and overbrewed. Well, now, don't even have the hassle of going to the staff room. Simply drink Colt. Colt is a cold tea alternative. It's literally cold tea, but without that tangy metallic taste of those cheap beakers that you use at work. Colt. Drink cold tea brewed by us. A little advert for Colt there. I do love a can of Colt, and they're bringing out a new one called Colt Greens, which is pretty exciting. And I'd urge you to just try it. Obviously, I've got skin in the game, but just try it. I offer it to all my guests, and they all, without question, adore it. Especially my friend Zoe. Anyway, as I mentioned at the start of the episode today, been teaching for 25 years, and I'm going to do something about that this year, because you don't get a clock or a recognition for that length of service, but I'm going to do something special about it. But with that comes both old stories and wisdom, and I'm going to share some of those now. Old age teachers. So, I am old enough as a teacher to remember the excitement of the video trolley. Now, if you haven't seen one of these before, I would recommend you go onto Google and look up the TV trolley. It was a phenomenal device. This is when TVs had backs, and they were all about the booty. The CRT TV, cathode ray tube, really, really large, hefty glass. And I do actually remember the TVs used to be wood panelled. Now, I reckon there is a market for a wood panel TV now, but it's worth dabbling in, certainly, down memory lane. A TV was very, very special in those days. You had video cassettes, VCRs, and so this is why they're called videos now on YouTube. And you would have the VCR, and that was in a lockable box in a little stand underneath the TV trolley, and the TV would be wheeled in, plugged in, and then press play. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to that, but there was something quite magical and special about that. I realised that there is an absolute power to things like videos, Vimeo, YouTube, BBC Bite Size. And you can do the most wonderful, most absorbing, most exciting lesson known to man, and yet you won't have the passive engagement that you'll get with a YouTube clip. And that's what we're competing against. But there is something about it that makes it a little bit lazy, dare I say it. If you're finding a concept hard to explain, watching the YouTube video or sharing the YouTube video with the children is a very, very quick stopgap, but it doesn't actually teach the principles to the children. So I am very much a teacher who, if I'm using YouTube video, will start it, answer questions, add details. And sometimes I think, well, what actual benefit has the YouTube video been apart from a visual reminder? On that, a complaint to YouTube: please treat us like sane people, because when you try and pause a YouTube video, you press the space bar, don't you? Of course you do, because that's what would normally happen for everything else that's paused. And yet, for some reason, YouTube do not want you to use that pause button. So and I understand it's designed to be monetized. They don't want you to stop watching. So they make it difficult to pause, and it's really annoying, possibly one of the most annoying things ever. But the use of video is quite common, and it reminds me of a chapter in one book I wrote, which was about learning lents. And a learning lent is to essentially to stop using something for a little while and think of an alternative. And sometimes I do this in my diary or for certain weeks, where I'll write in something that I want to test out and go, I'm not going to use this week. I'm not going to use video this week, or I'm not going to use photocopies this week, or I'm going to use flip chart paper this week, because I tend not to. And it's worth trialing, pausing the things that you use a lot of and seeing what alternatives come up and what other ideas you can utilize. It makes your teaching genuinely more efficient, because you're thinking of alternatives all the time. I do remember, and I'm fairly sure I've shared this story, about someone panicking in the photocopy room at one school I worked at, because the photocopy wasn't working, and they said, well, how am I going to teach? And I wanted to say to them, you can absolutely teach without any photocopy paper. And very interesting. I wonder what the minimum you need to teach, because I'd imagine, certainly for me, from my perspective, it is nothing. I need nothing. I can just talk. Ideally, I'd have a board and a pen, but I can also teach with a piece of paper and a pencil and a group gathered round. So go to the minimum, and then build up from there, because everything else can often be superfluous. I'm gonna boldly say that. Now, a feature that I named at the very start, and I should have kept the jingle raw materials, but I've changed it slightly. I've got several clips for you in this feature, which is now a regular, and I believe Tom Rogers' favourite part. Reset Wood. Now, Reset Wood, of course, the first episode was in a wood, and it's an opportunity for me to absolutely relish being outdoors. I think it's really good. If we're talking about mental wealth again, we're going to go back to that idea that we're really enjoying the outdoors. The outdoors is such a cleansing environment for us to really bring out our true us and give us a refresh. And I'm reading a book called 52 Ways to Walk, and one of the chapters was to walk by the sea. And in it, the lady who writes 52 Ways to Walk, brilliant book, says that the rates of depression for people who live a kilometre or less from the sea are far less compared to people who live further away from the sea. So last Sunday, I had a hankering. It's a dangerous phrase in my house, leads to mischief. And a hankering is like a desire, an itch. And I had a hankering to eat fish and chips on the seafront. And I looked at places that I'd never been to before. I was looking at Brighton at first, and then I went across to the Witterings. I live on the south coast, by south coast, quite far from the south coast. And then I saw a place that I'd never been to called Hayling Island. And I've never been there before. Looked at some pictures, the weather looked okay. I found a walk, looked decent. So I went down there and had a little walk. Two things happened as I recorded my little ramble, on both the ramble talk and the ramble walk, is that firstly, my heavy breathing came back again. I think that the phone is just very good at picking up me breathing very heavily. The second thing is that I didn't quite realise just how windy it was. So there's a moment in the 2-minute audio that you can actually hear just how windy it was. And I say, it was a bit breezy. So hopefully you can make it out, and I'll talk to you about it afterwards. I apologise in the start for just how windy this recording is. I need to get one of those microphones that's got something fluffy on the end. By the coast today. If you can hear the seagulls. You're never more than 66 miles away in the UK from the sea. Here I am, enjoying the gorgeous weather. Breezy weather. Noisy breathing. So I'm going to stop it there. It's very noisy. I appreciate that. But if I paint the scene for you, I was walking with a huge smile on my face. I'd walked for 2 hours at that point. I'd had fish and chips on the seafront. out of a bag, wrapped up, and the sun was shining. In fact, I was wearing sunglasses at the time. The weather was better than I'd imagined, and I'm walking on the west of Hayling Island, which is a little nature reserve, little inlet for seabirds, and an app that I'm sure I've recommended before called Merlin helps you to immediately identify birds. And so when I got back to the car, I got my phone ready and clicked the Merlin app, and there were two children nearby, and they saw what I was doing. They saw that I was getting my phone out and pointing it towards the nature reserve, and they decided to walk over and have an argument just by the car. Now, if you can make out, you can hear a Eurasian oyster catcher. And it sounds like I'm very confident in telling you that, but in fact, I'm looking at my phone, which tells me it's a Eurasian oyster catcher. But if you listen carefully, you can just about hear it before the children start arguing right by the car. Now, I don't know about you, but as a teacher, it's very hard to be off duty, isn't it? It's very hard to be off duty. And I was desperately biting my tongue not to tell those children off because they were ruining my recording. And by the time they had cleared off, unfortunately, so had the Eurasian oyster catcher. And because it was very windy, I couldn't pick up as many of the bird sounds as I was hoping to, but I did record again as soon as they'd been cleared off because their parents had decided to turn up and start parenting. And so this is the birds. Now, unfortunately, we lost the Eurasian oyster catcher. We've got a black-headed gull and a greenfinch, European greenfinch, in this recording, plus also huge amounts of wind. Now, the brilliant thing about the Merlin app, and I can highly recommend it, well, one thing about it is it's free. Second thing about it is that it's free because it uses that data and feeds it to a database. So the fact that it's located where I am, located the data and identified that you can hear a gull and a greenfinch is fantastic because in their database they can go, we know that greenfinches and gulls were there in that location. And they're using this information, I believe it's Carnegie Mellon University in America. They're using this to track migration and species dominance and speciation, in fact. So it's absolutely fantastic. The fact that you can identify a bird and it pops up pretty much instantly. If you're looking at your phone discreetly, you can sound like the most confident ornithologist whilst you're identifying the birds. The fact that that data is contributing to science is one of those apps that's very symbiotically fantastic. Everyone benefits. It reminds me of those birds that go on the back of crocodiles and do all the picking between the scales. Everyone's benefiting there. They're getting fed. The crocodiles having basically like a health and hygiene check, examination, skin examination. Everyone wins. And sometimes an app comes along that does exactly that. It's free and it benefits you, but it also benefits them. I love it. And it's really, really good for identifying all sorts of birds. The best thing, I have to say, I've done before is to have it in one place and then just forget about it and leave it for a little while. Because what you can do is you can play back the sounds of the birds whenever you want to. So you can play. I've got it on my phone now, and this is from Norwich in April. So it's got a whole load. It was 11 birds in this, and I can play back the sounds of the different birds just by pressing on their names, and it uses my recording. Absolutely fantastic. And I'd highly recommend it. So it's highlighting the birds, and so I can play this and let you know what's playing. Chiff chaff there. Goldcrest. Yeah, really, really fantastic. So I'd highly recommend that. Oh, wow. 2 apps recommended for you. And not 10 minutes ago, I told you to turn off your phones. And now I'm telling you to turn on your phones and listen to the birds. Anyway, on to something else that we like, which is another way of using collective skills to solve a problem. Copper bottoming. Copper bottoming. So this harks back to the Robots film with Rodney Copperbottom. See a need, fill a need. And Twitter is absolutely brilliant for this. So we're going to talk about marking papers. Strategies for marking papers. We're coming up to marking season. If you're in year 6, you'll have been marking SATs for the last couple of weeks, I'd imagine. Maybe 1 or 2 more papers coming up. So I want to talk about the different ways and methods that I mark. And then I've asked Twitter, and they have come back in their droves. And by droves, I mean about 7 people have replied. Doesn't matter, because what they've suggested is absolute gold. So here's my strategy for marking. I find it very much more successful to mark standing up. I think that you mark about a third faster by standing up than sitting down. I'm fairly convinced of that. If you have a school which has got science benches, then laying out your work along those science benches is amazing. One of the years that I taught year 6, I was in a converted science classroom, and the benches are just the right height to actually mark the papers. So I would lay out all the papers doubled open. So you'd have pages, let me make this right, say pages 4, 5 open, and then next to that, the next booklet would be 4, 5 open, 4, 5 open. You'd have the mark scheme on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Key detail. You look at the mark scheme on the left-hand side, you work out what the answers are, you use your system. So for me, it's something like the answer, if it's a word, the box position, so if it's box 2, box 3, the features, and I would go along and mark pages 4, 5, turn the page. Next booklet, 4, 5, turn the page, and I'd walk my way along. So not only am I marking, I'm getting my steps in. And when you get to the other end, of course, you've got the answers. So you've got the mark scheme on the other end, and you can use that to get ready for pages 6, 7. So you get the answers for 6, 7, and you answer the booklet that's on the right-hand side, do the mark scheme for 6, 7, turn the page, go to the next book along. And so you go backward and forward, standing up. So you get the steps in, and you also get to benefit from marking everything at the same time. So this is my method for marking. And also I try and mark as quickly as I can to get it done. Now what I'm looking for is some help to put in the gap analysis data. Those are the ones and zeros to tell you actually what the children are learning and not learning, or rather remembering and not remembering. But I asked on Twitter suggestions for ways that they would use to mark. So I'm just having a look at some of the answers, and I'll read out some of these. I've got 16 answers. I apologise. So I'm going to read out the names unless they've got a padlock next to them, which means that they're private. So an English teacher, Mr. M. McAllister, says, same number of paper clips as papers. I remember this one. As I mark a question, I transfer a paperclip over to a different receptacle. I also mark in bundles, and I don't take a break in a bundle. I've been putting on flow music that I just can't get distracted by, which means I can't stop yet. I'm not sure about the paperclips thing. I suppose that's a tracking device. Andy Colley, who's very, very good at giving advice, he suggests mark 1 page at a time. Format your mark scheme so 1 page on that equals 1 page on the test. That is a brilliant piece of advice. There is a lady on Twitter called Sophie who's made 1 page SATs answers. Also fantastic. It says, have consistent short codes. Don't tick or cross unless it's to specify part of an answer that's correct or incorrect. Otherwise, just write the marks gained next to the answer. Good advice. Darren Mead has put, what can you hope to learn by performing this onerous task? Can it wait until after the Easter break? What can you do to help them following this? What do they need to work on? Who needs my help most? Then, was it worth it? Did I mark the right thing? Okay, he seems like he's a little bit cross about me asking about marking, but I know that some people will have marking to do. And, hate it. So why not find out different tips? Mrs. Kiwi says, I'm a mark the same page on all papers kind of girl. After about the third paper, I have the answer logged in my brain. Motivation, chocolate on the go, wine at the end. Brilliant advice there. That is like it's a good motivation for generally everything. Lisa Pettifer, also very good in advice and guidance, says, I used to find that the process of denial, avoidance, and mad rush worked. But more seriously, decide what it's for and for whom first and mark tasks accordingly. That feels very much like a secondary answer, but it's a very, very good piece of advice. Andy Colley has gone off. I'm just going to work out how long he went off for. 2 minutes. He went off for 2 minutes and remembered that he wanted to say something else and said, don't write comments, keep a notebook with question number and points for whole class feedback. Also a really good tip. If you're not doing gap analysis, that's a really good tip. Staff DB66 says, I tend to do a question at a time or half a question based on the length of the question. Just seems to be better to spot issues and themes and mark consistently. Not entirely sure it is fastest, but I prefer this. And then David Priest, Dr. Priest, I apologise, Dr. Priest says, I think it massively depends on the nature of the papers. If you have a quick fire round of short questions and then an essay, for example, you might want to mark a section at a time. Some people block out a question at a time. Essays, easier to do in blocks. Again, a secondary answer, but also useful tips. Geography teacher, Campbell Geog, says, we get them to peer or self-assess at least up to the 4 MQs, 4 mark questions. Then have a good go at estimating the 6 to 8 mark questions. I think seeing the mark scheme is useful. Absolutely, and I would say that that's very good in primary as well. Certainly something that we do in primary, certainly that I'm used to doing, is to sharing the mark scheme and showing just how specific, and sometimes it might feel mildly petty to with their marking scheme, the words that they will accept and not accept, as well as highlighting the mistakes. Mr. Thompson, which is Mr. Tomp24, says, mark straight onto computer if you have a specific QLA document. And then L. Gray says, one question at a time. And then she goes on to, I'm assuming how weird. And for longer A-level answers, 2 highlighters. One colour means great stuff, green. The other means you need to think about this again, pink. 1 tick for AO1 and 2 ticks for AO2. Don't know what that means, but we'll go with it. Dr. PD Prido says, I find marking whole papers fastest. The first one is slow and then progressively faster. Motivating because you get to see the data and possible issues coming in straight away, plus less code switching for different handwriting. This is for physics. That's a really, really good tip, isn't it? I really like that. It's really, really helpful to have that idea, especially with handwriting. If you've got questions that you're asking of the children, their handwriting, and I have got an opinion on this, does have an impact on that. Katie Illingworth, and her surname is Katie L. Winterburn, so she got married. It's allowed. For exam questions, question by question, definitely. For essays, 10 at a time, then a break. Whole class feedback sheets have changed my life. I highlight relevant areas and comments. That's really good. And then Imagine Claire says, don't mark per paper, but per page. You memorise the mark scheme and you can get through them quickly. Proper Teacher says beer. And then Vicky Bryan says burn them, burn them, burn them. And I think what a great place to end Burn them, burn them, burn them. We know that they're useful, but it can be quite frustrating. We've got a few more. One's just come in. This is Tabitha Serge. She said, exam board style marking, 90 seconds skimming over per paper with AOs noted down. AOs in the outer margin and an overall level at the end. Whole class mark scheme distributed for feedback. I need to ask her what AOs is. Because I have no clue. I think it's very much a secondary based little schemata there, but really, really nice to see the different suggestions that people have got. So thank you very much for contributing. I love it. Really, really appreciate your contributions, guys. Thank you very much. And we will come back to if anyone's got any more contributions for that. I'd be absolutely delighted to hear some more of your hacks. For now, though, we should go to an advert, and then we'll get the Teacher Talk Radio news. So, quick ad for a food subscription service that I've been using as a teacher. Really enjoy it.
Food Fling, meal kits designed by teachers for teachers. Simply grab the Food Fling bag from your fridge, throw it in the microwave for a couple of minutes, then pour the baking hot ingredients straight into a bowl, where you can eat it at leisure whilst falling asleep watching Netflix. Pour any remainder into that strange Tupperware container you've got hidden at the back of the cupboard and take it into work the next day. Food Fling.
Absolutely brilliant. And now we've got news from the 16th to 22nd. So news coming up now.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC News channel and news website features an interview with a secondary head teacher 1 year on from an incident in his school which resulted in a lockdown. Head teacher Kieran Stapleton confronted a male who had entered the school building, telling office staff he had a gun. The man has since been detained indefinitely in a secure psychiatric hospital. Mr. Stapleton talks of confronting the man on the corridors while staff followed lockdown procedures, locking classrooms, pulling down blinds and asking pupils to hide under desks and remain calm and silent. Mr. Stapleton used the interview to highlight the issue of mental health and the importance of support for young people in order to avoid instances of violence. He also pointed to the bravery of staff and pupils and the way they responded to the lockdown that was not a drill. The business section of the BBC News site focuses on the impact the post office scandal has had on the children of sub-postmasters. A group set up to support those affected was organised by Katie Downey, whose father was made bankrupt trying to repay money after the Horizon system failed. Ms Downey was 11 when the family moved to France, and she stopped talking for 2 years. She set up the group Lost Chances for the Children of Sub-Postmasters as a way to support those affected, but is also trying to gain compensation for the changed lives. The group has 40 members so far, and many talk of difficult home lives, bullying at school, and feelings of shame after parents were accused. Some also shared experiences of poor mental health, eating disorders, and panic attacks. The group wants members of the public and other groups and agencies to understand how such trauma can affect children and young people. This is so that they are no longer considered as too remote from the harms caused, simply because the harm was not directly inflicted upon them. The holy month of Ramadan began earlier this month, and many schools have made arrangements to support pupils and staff who are fasting. This is something that many schools have done for years, but this year staff shortages have meant that some schools have had to modify their usual procedures. Schools report difficulties in supervising pupils who are fasting in spaces away from food and drink, as they struggle to find additional staff or enough cover for absent staff. One primary school in the east of England resorted to asking parents to take fasting pupils home for the lunch period due to significant staff shortages. Parents expressed frustration at the request, with some quoted by East England News as saying it was insensitive and ridiculous. Some did point out that the school has often been supportive in the past and that it is proud of its multicultural awareness. The school said it was working hard to find a solution to the issue, but could not compromise pupil safeguarding. Difficulties in recruitment, retention and accessing supply staff are an ongoing challenge for many schools. The University of Cambridge is scrapping its state school targets for undergraduate admissions, according to the Telegraph newspaper. The university said it would take candidate schools into account when selecting students, but would no longer have a target for the share of state and private schools pupils gaining places. Cambridge has been accused of discriminating against pupils from private schools amid a decline in offer rates at top independent schools. Vice-Chancellor Deborah Prentice said there is no discrimination, but competition is fiercer as state school pupils have been increasingly encouraged to apply. The targets were originally introduced to increase the portion of state-educated undergraduates from 63.4% to 69.1% by 2024-25. The university has beaten its target with 72.9% of new students in 2022-23 coming from state schools. Finally, a head teacher's letter to parents on the subject of poor quality school meals has gone viral. The letter was sent after issues with the school's catering provider, Chartwell's, led to complaints from pupils over quality and portion sizes. In the letter, the head teacher says he would be exceptionally unhappy if his own children were served the food, and asks, how difficult is it to bake a potato? Whilst the letter focuses on issues with food service, it has highlighted the problems schools face around private finance initiative contract management, funding issues and the impact inflation has had on the food prices, which have left some companies struggling. Some commentators have also raised the issue of the impact poor quality meals can have on pupils who receive free school meals. It's not the first time Chartwell's has been in the news, as the issue of food quality was raised during the pandemic, when the company was accused of providing poor quality food parcels to families during school closures. Chartwell's said it was working with the school to rectify issues and acknowledged that the service had fallen well below the high standards we demand. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Little jacket potato tip for you, because he did ask, the head teacher did ask, how hard is it to cook a jacket potato? Now, I don't want to be an air fryer bore, but if you pop a couple of jackets in the microwave for 5 minutes and then put them in your air fryer for 25 minutes, they are A1. And I can recommend doing that for sweet potatoes, which is the most remarkable. I do like the fact that vegetables operate differently. Sweet potato is essentially 19 minutes completely firm, 20th minute in the air fryer, mush. But in the jacket, the skin stays secure, absolutely fantastic. Now, whilst the news was on, I did identify what AO stands for. Now, I'm assuming that most of the people who are listening to this are either drunk or primary or both. You know, it's Easter. And AO stands for Assessment Objectives. So Tabitha replied straight away. It takes half an hour or less to do a set of 31 plus essays and give them an incredibly clear sense of which band they're hitting and what they've missed. And for the teacher, the dopamine hit of having done a set of essays is incredible. Now, in primary, we have something called the Teacher Assessment Framework, which is a series of 6 or 7 statements, and the children either are meeting below the expected level at the expected level or greater depth. And basically, it is a trawl through their books to identify which of these standards they have met. So it's very, very similar thing, assessment objectives. But there has been some mild ribbing about the fact that I didn't know this as a primary colleague, that I didn't know that AO stood for assessment objectives. And it's very interesting that, because there are big differences between primary and secondary. And I know that there was an awful lot of excitement and courses being offered for these miraculous new things called mini whiteboards that are being used in secondary. And I think as primary colleagues, we've looked on with wide-eyed wonder that these are apparently revelatory devices. It feels a little bit like watching cave people discovering a wheel, because we've been using mini whiteboards for probably about 10 to 15 years. But I do love the fact that secondary school teachers discover something and think that they're the first to ever use it. So I would like to offer to secondary school teachers a new stationary device called a pencil. Now, the way that this operates is that it's a small cylindrical piece of wood with some silicone that has been injected into the middle, and it can be used to write, to draw with. It's very, very versatile because you can rub it out. It's very good for teaching children cursive handwriting rather than the Bic biro that you seem to love letting them use. It's very adaptable. It's portable. You can use it underwater. You can use it it doesn't require gravity. And I know that sounds really, really daft, but lots of pens require gravity in order to operate correctly. For those of you who don't believe me, then try leaving 2 biros, one lid down and one lid up. Test them out after a day and you'll discover that the one lid up, the gravity has forced the ink away. So I'd highly recommend pencils for secondary colleagues. They're new stationary items that we've been using in primary for about the last 90 years. You could maybe give them a whirl, tell us how wonderful they are, set up a course. I don't know, or what works for you. We've got another recommendation. This is just in 10 seconds. It's fresh in terms of teacher hacks. And it says, mark the longest or most challenging ones first and leave the easiest ones until last. And then as a disclaimer for your information, this doesn't work. Now, we always remember to, always try to remember on this show to give Gillian Keegan a little recommendation and just let her know that we think that she's been working really hard. So, Gillian Keegan, thank you for all you do in education. And everyone in the studio would like to thank you for everything you do, because you really do work very hard. Little clap there for Gillian Keegan, who does work really hard, and no one thanks her. It's a shame about that, isn't it? Real shame about that. We really should try harder to thank her.
In the dock.
Seating plans. Seating plans are in the dock at the moment. And the reason that they're in the dock, it's an interesting one, seating plans. It's hard to know. Again, I think this is a secondary thing, but placing children in class, whether you use rows or groups, and whether you have the children sitting next to their friends or not. Now, there is an argument. This is why it's in the dock, you see. There is an argument that children who sit next to their friends tend to get motivated more easily, but they also get more distracted. So it's very hard to decide whether it's more effective to have the children sitting with friends or to have them in a place that you're choosing. My personal strategy is to have the children operating on a tennis partners basis, is that you're trying to find strengths and weaknesses which are complemented rather than distracting. So I think very carefully about the children who are distracting And then I think about the children who've got bulletproof concentrations, and I try and match those children up to start off with. I also give those children heavy rotation so that if they have someone who is quite distracting next to them, they do get a little break. I then think about the children who need a bit of confidence and sit them next to a slightly more confident child, but not the most confident child. And I try to place the most confident children together. Reason being that they can sort of sometimes cancel each other out. They can tend to be more talkative. They can cancel each other out. I have to admit, I am a fan of rows. I do like children facing the front. Really not a fan of groups. I know that some teachers like the horseshoe, but my perfect classroom has the children in rows facing the front, facing the board. There's very little excuse then, because if you can see them turning around or getting distracted, it's very, very easy to see and nip in the bud. It's something that I much prefer doing than anything else. So seating plans, they're in the doc for me because I think that it should be much more fluid and flexible than perhaps we allow primary to be. You think about a child in secondary school, they are probably going to 4 or 5 lessons every day. So 25 different locations every single week. And they're sitting in different places at the front, at the back, at the side, with someone that they don't get on with someone they do get on with. And so I think that at primary, we sometimes set them up for a fall by keeping them in their seats, in their groups, for quite a length of time before we start adapting and adjusting those, which I feel sorry for the children in some respects, because certainly the classes that I've had ask pretty much constantly how often they can change and whether they can change or not. I would encourage changes whenever possible. So that's my view. What's your view? Drop into the show and let me know. Tell me your thoughts on whether you think children should have seating plans or not. Do you think seating plans are a good idea or not? I'm interested to know what your thoughts are.
Hey, education content publishers. We know what it's like. You've got some cracking slides, but they're just too short. Well, worry no more. We can now offer slide bloat. We can add extra slides, add click-ins so numbers fly in and fly out, up to 20 actions per slide. Get that boring old deck of 13 slides up to 46, so it's more than a minute per slide. Really frustrate teachers, but justify your cost price and make those slides really bloaty.
Obviously not a personal attack at certain slide makers at all. That's not the case. I'm a big fan of lots of companies that make slides. Anyway, on to a feature that we've had in the past on the show. I'm hoping that you like it, and it is it's me bearing my soul.
Observable.
You'll have seen the films where someone is talking about someone else and their back is to the door, to the window, to the hatch, and they're talking to their friends, and their friends' faces drop, and the person carries on talking, and after a while they pause and go, they're behind me, aren't they? And often very funny. This happened to me in an observation that I was in, so I'd like to share it with you because I think it's probably the most authentic observation that I had. And it was basically an English lesson, and I was doing everything Bumblebee-like. So nothing, if you took a photograph of this lesson and me teaching it, it would be of Tom Bennett level furore, I'd imagine, because it could be criticised to death. I was sitting in the middle of the class, genuinely in the middle of the class, in front of a child's desk. I was sitting with my back to the door and back to, obviously because I was in the middle, half the class, and I was talking across the class, so I wasn't at the front. I was sat down, and I'd drawn the children's attention to me because I was going to read out a boy's work. Now this young boy, not a hugely confident writer, and he takes a long time to get going, long time to warm up, if you like. Anyway, he had written a brilliant first paragraph, and we have a game in our class called Roast and Toast, and we didn't play Roast or Toast, but essentially what I was doing was I was toasting it. I was giving it praise. And I drew the class in and I said, children, this is something I'd like to share. This is his work. We'll call him Simon. This is Simon's work. He's worked really hard on this. It's not something that he's very, very confident in doing. And I should add at this point that I do this joke where I say that I'm not going to impersonate the child's voice, and then I do a bad impersonation of the child's voice. It's a running joke in the class. Everyone enjoys it, but it's one of those ones that's an in-joke. Always risky, because again, that bumblebee snapshot, it's not good. If people don't understand the in-joke, it could look cruel, divisive, bullyish, insensitive, but actually is a really fun joke that you can do with the class. So I have Simon's work in front of me. I said, obviously I'm not going to do an impression of Simon's voice, but I'm going to read this out. Of course it's obvious that. And then, the class laugh. It's an easy laugh, but I always do it. And so they know it. And I said, I apologise, I'll just read using my own voice. And I read the passage, and it was really good. And I said, isn't that a great passage? Isn't that a great idea? The way that he's written it, the language, the sentences are cohesive. Really, really impressed with you, Simon. Well done. And the voice from behind me said, I agree. And I turned around, and my head teacher was standing there with a visitor. And obviously that's the first I had noticed that she was there. And I have to admit, I was surprised that my class were quite so quiet. But up until that point, I had no idea that she was in the class. And so I was caught teaching. And there's an activity we do for Reading Week and for World Book Day and World Book Week and all that jazz about getting caught reading. And you give prizes to children caught reading. And then the other 35 weeks of the year, we ignore them. But I really like that idea that I was caught teaching, because that was authentic in the moment teaching. And we've spoken about this in the past, I'm sure, about some teachers who get excited about observation. It's a chance to shine, they up their game, etc. And others, they crumble into dust with the anxiety of teaching. And what's interesting is that by being caught teaching, there I was at my most authentically, most successful, I would say, most authentically calm and rational level. I'd love to know about your observation experiences. I don't mind observations at all, really. And my next show, I'm probably going to talk about what I've learnt by observing students, because you get an awful lot as a teacher. And I think that if you are with a SCIT student or a PGCE student, you are absolutely missing a trick if you are not observing their lessons and looking at your children, your class, from the back of the class, seeing how they interact, because it's absolutely fascinating. You're also missing a trick if you're not learning anything from the children in your class, because it's a phenomenal way of picking up their ability to teach and what you do differently and how you can improve. I've always learned from a SCIT student or a PGCE student something about my own teaching. Anyway, highly recommend it. It's very worth doing. Spineless. This is the point in the show where I recommend a book to you, and it's often a non-educational book. And this one has got a bit of a story behind it. Shocker! Lockyer's got a story. So the story behind this book is that I bought it online from Amazon, and I bought it on Amazon Marketplace, which means that it was second hand. And I bought it at a good price. It said good condition. And then when I opened it up, I noticed that someone had gone through and underlined certain points, and that really annoyed me. So I complained about it, and I got a refund, actually, for the full amount. So I think I spent £1 on the book, £1.80 to have it delivered. So I got £2.80 refunded. Yeah, I am that petty that I would complain about a £2.80 book, but it had been tarnished. Anyway, I'm reading the book, and I'm a bit annoyed about the fact that it's been damaged. because someone's drawn underneath it. So they'd underlined certain sections. As I'm reading it, they're sort of very judicious and canny with what they've underlined. And I get to the end of the book, it's like, do you know what? I'm glad I got a refund, but they did underline the best bits, like they had highlighted the best bits. Anyway, I'm getting a book for a friend of mine who loves these sorts of books as well. And he, obviously I couldn't give him my copy because I really liked it. I've read it twice now, which is unusual for me. And so I got him the book, proper, fresh, clean. And I give him the book, and before I open it up, I tell him the story. And I say, it's really good. I got a copy, but unfortunately someone had underlined all the bits in it. And then I told him what it's about. He really liked it. I really liked the concept, started flicking through it, and discovered that his book had got lines in it as well. And we looked really closely. And it turns out that the book has printed those lines. So they have emphasised those lines. So what I had thought was abject pencil vandalism was actually just me being a bit of a twit and not identifying that there was printed in the book itself. Anyway, on to the book. It's by a man called Gary Keller with J. Papasan, which J. Papasan, that sounds like a bird, doesn't it? Gary Keller wrote the book called The One Thing. And it's the number one bestseller. And it says at the bottom, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. Now, this book I'm recommending because it's absolutely fantastic. It's really, really good. It explains about cutting through clutter, achieving better results in less time, building momentum towards your goal, dialing down stress, overcoming that overwhelming feeling, reviving your energy, staying on track, and master what matters to you. It does feel relatable to school. And it's got a very good analogy about dominoes. And if I find the dominoes analogy, it's about the domino effect is about geometric progression. And it was about the research that they did about dominoes, that a single domino, can push over something that is 50% larger than it. That's the maximum. And then that 50% domino can push over something that's 50% larger than that, and so on. And it's talking about this as in physics, that they could topple bigger things. And so you get this progression of dominoes, and it's an implication that if you tackle one thing, it gives you the confidence to tackle something slightly larger and slightly larger. And the message I took from this is a philosophy that I really like called Imagineering. And Imagineering is where you have a really big idea and you engineer your way backward to how it's possible. So we imagine progression to be linear, but this geometric progression says that you can have the confidence to tackle something really, really large. You just have to think about the steps that you need to get to tackle in order to get to that large step. Because a domino 2 inches tall, 23 progressions would be the size of the Eiffel Tower. So this really nice concept about tackling one thing really successfully, and it's finding that lead domino and whacking away until it falls. Now, I'm looking at the book now, and it's not a very clear pencil line. I'm reading one of the underlined sections. It does look like a pencil. And so rather than my quotes that I've highlighted from my Kindle, these are ones that are from the book. The key is over time. Success is built sequentially. It's one thing at a time. And it's really important, it says, to tackle one thing at a time. It goes on to advise that no one succeeds on their own. And I think that that's very true. Working on one thing, you're going to have to tune down what you're drawing, but you're going to have to draw on other people's help. Because I can promise you, and this is very, very true, even though I find it tricky at times to work on projects with other people, no project I've worked on with other people hasn't been improved by their involvement. And it's a fundamental truth. The chap writing this, Gary Keller, says it's a fundamental truth of working on one thing. The one thing sits at the heart of success and is the starting point for achieving extraordinary results. The book goes on to tell you how those results are connected. And I can highly recommend the book. And it's about prioritizing things and removing other aspects in order to focus on the things that are important for you. Now, in teaching, you're drawn so many different ways. There are always so many things to do, and it's a case of flagging up the things that are priorities for you. So I'd recommend, if you're not good at that, and if you're a king or queen of procrastination, then you should create the urgent important matrix. And this is a very, very simple grid where you have across the top 2 columns, important and unimportant, and along the side, urgent and non-urgent. And you place all the tasks you have to do, and you treat these boxes as 1 and 2 across the top, 3, 4 across the bottom, and you tackle the items in that order. So you tackle the urgent important things, then the urgent not important things, then the important non-urgent things, and then the other final box, which is often the fun stuff. I hate to tell you that, but it is the fun stuff. And what's interesting is that we're drawn to the 4, but actually it's the 1 that really, really counts. I'd recommend this book. It's published by John Murray Learning. You can find it on Amazon. If you do buy it second hand, I would just warn you that it's comes with pencil marks. I'm just going to finish with the goal setting section, which is really, really clever. So the someday goal. So this is goal setting for the now. So it says to the now, rather. So it says someday goal. What's the one thing I want to do someday? Then you go down to the 5-year goal. Based on my someday goal, what's the one thing I can do in the next 5 years to get to the someday goal? And then you go down to the 1-day goal. Based on my 5-year goal, what's the one thing I can do this year to head towards to that? Then you go to the monthly goal. Based on my 1-year goal, what's the one thing I can do this month? Weekly goal. Based on my monthly goal, what's the one thing I can do this week? Daily goal. Based on my weekly goal, what's the one thing I can do today? And right now, based on my daily goal, what's the one thing I can do right now? Because future purpose connects to present priority. What a line. And that, the hilarious thing is that that's not underlined. What? That bit is not underlined. Madness. Future purpose connects to present priority. What a brilliant line. I found that so engaging in terms of having that future purpose, and what you're doing now will make an impact. Regular listeners will know that I've been working on a target of writing for 10 minutes a day. And I've done that every single day so far this year. And I'm halfway through my crime thriller novel, Small Details, as a result of that. And so on my computer, just with 10 minutes a day, and I squeeze it in sometimes, other times it's done and dusted before you know it. I've got 30,000 words on my computer just from 10 minutes a day, just from giving myself 10 minutes writing time a day. So technically, I'll have written 120,000 words this year just from 10 minutes. What investment in time. And I know that I can improve on things like TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I can learn new skincare routines. I can learn products that will help change my life. I can see websites that would recommend and benefit me. But I also know that by not doing those things for 10 minutes a day, and by writing for 10 minutes a day, I'll have written 120,000 words this year, book and a half. And I know that by reading for 10 minutes a day, in fact, it's very hard to just read for 10 minutes a day. You get drawn in, don't you? You will absolutely read more than 12 books in a year. My record was 107. I'm targeting 52, and I'm 18 or 19 books ahead of where I should be at the moment. I know that I'm going to smash a couple in the next couple of weeks or the holidays, because it's very hard just to read for 10 minutes. You should try it. Just read for 10. Time passes in a flash, I can promise you. Set your timer on it. Anyway, that book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, highly recommended.
Teacher hacks.
We're looking back on the teacher hacks, which is the marking strategies, and we've had a few more encouraging comments for this. Have we? Maybe we haven't. No, we haven't. Someone has just retweeted. I apologise. And I also put a tweet out earlier about fire drill because it's the last day of school for lots of 70% of schools today. And lots of people will be having fire drills practices because you're by law supposed to have them once a term, and so yesterday or today people have been having fire drill practice. So I put a tweet out about that, and then I added to that possibly one of the most successful tweets ever as a throwaway line, which is often the way. I'll read it to you because I enjoyed it. Best comment I ever heard in a fire drill was a child moaning about the need for silence. It's not like talking makes us more flammable. People really liked that tweet, which is surprising, because it's just a bit of fun. Anyway, we've got an advert from John Catt now. Now, John Catt, this is a genuine advert, sponsor Teach Talk Radio, and they are great publishers. I was looking at a book recently, and it drew me in very quickly, and yet straight away was interestingly published by John Catt. I haven't bought it yet because I'm tight, but I do plan to, if that's any benefit. So let's hear from John Catt.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
So that John Catt code there, really, really useful, really beneficial. And I think that if you're, I'm going to use it. Why not? Why wouldn't I? If you're looking at teaching resources, then the John Catt website is brilliant in terms of their responsiveness to things that people talk about and how quickly they can produce a book from a respected expert regarding that concept. So very, very high recommendation to look at John Catt. Last feature here before we say goodbye and good night for now. There's a bottle of wine waiting for me in the wings, as well as some eggs, and that is something that we've missed out in the past, but it's a little recommendation with this feature.
Quotable.
I am a huge fan of a quote, and the diary I use for school and work is one that lives in a leather case. It is a moleskin. They are expensive, but my logic is that I use it every single day. I use a pencil. Secondary teachers, we've learnt about those earlier in the show. A clickable pencil, because there's so many changes that are made, and pencils are just nicer to write with, generally speaking. And in my moleskin, I have a week to view diary. This is, possibly the most inane and dull thing that I've probably told you about. But on the left-hand side, it's got the days blocked out with a nice space at the top. And on the right-hand side, blank lines. And I tend to put a quote at the top of every single week. So I thought I'd read some of these and share them with you. So I'm going to read you the last couple of weeks. In fact, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to read you the January weeks and tell you what I think of them. Now, I found these in books. I've read them online, or someone has shared them, and the quote ends up being sort of the theme for the week. A little motivator, a little support, a little encouragement. I think of quotes as being shorter and more arrow-like than poetry. Although I love poetry, especially short form poetry, which I know purists hate, a quote really gets there really quickly. This first one is in the first week of January, and it's from Dostoevsky, because why not? And it says, if you want to overcome the whole world, overcome yourself. And that's incredibly true, incredibly accurate, especially of teachers. We do have this cloud over our heads, and we do get very anxious and worried about everything with imposter syndrome. And we have to tackle that. We have to overcome ourselves if we want to overcome the whole world. And by overcoming the whole world, we probably just mean our classroom or the class. Really important values there. This is Browning, and this is a great quote. And I remember actually reading this to my class, and because the diary is open at school, the children know that I use pencil. They know that I use quotes, and I read the quotes to them every single week. On Mondays, we always have a question for registration, and I always read out the quote for the week so that they've got an idea of what I'm talking about. So this is from Browning. Let me taste the whole of it. And that means, to me, don't go half in, don't go full in. Like, immerse yourself. Really, really make it. Go for it. Don't resist. Plunge. Let me taste the whole of it. Browning. It's a good, interesting thing to see how quotes continue and are sort of themically spread. So this is the third week in January, so it's following on. And what's interesting about this is it relates to the previous one. And this is Amelia Earhart, and her quote is, "The most effective way to do it is to do it." So don't hold back, get going, start. So let me taste the whole of it, Browning, followed by Amelia Earhart. The most effective way to do it is to do it. What a powerful message. Immerse yourself, get involved, get stuck in. This quote, I don't know where I got it from or where I read it from, but I really like it, and I don't even know who this person is, in fact. Sophia Jones Short. As she has put, if you weren't ready, you wouldn't have the opportunity. And that's a really interesting one, especially for people who have imposter syndrome. And you're thinking like, oh, I don't know why they've asked me. I don't know if I can do it. And if they didn't think you could do it, they wouldn't be asking you. So I think that's a really, really positive message to take away. And the last one I'm going to read to you in January is Rory Sutherland, who is a very large marketing guy that you see online, speaks in epithets, but is fascinating. And he said, brilliance is fractal. Brilliance is fractal. And if you're looking at something with real detail, then you can see brilliance in the most fractal moments. So niche down, because brilliance is fractal. And it's been a delight talking to you for the last hour and 25 minutes. And I'm going to bid you farewell. Please do get in contact. Let me know what you think of the show. Features that I need to add, remove, change, adjust. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
That'll do.